Nora, age 28. If you met me today, you'd probably describe me as composed, polite, and maybe even distant. But that calmness wasn't something I was born with. It was something I built over years of being silenced, blamed and expected to sacrifice while others took advantage of my silence. I grew up in a middle-class home, in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. My parents, especially my mother, were very conscious of how others saw our family. My father, on the other hand, was more traditional. He believed that the eldest daughter had a certain duty, to hold the family together, to make sacrifices without complaint, to always put others first. I was that daughter. Since my teenage years, I had learned to be the responsible one, the one who stayed up late helping my younger siblings with their homework, the one who cooked when my mother wasn't feeling well, the one who quietly gave up her wants so others could have theirs. My younger sister Alina was the opposite. She was sweet, charming, and knew how to get what she wanted without ever lifting a finger. Everyone adored her. My parents often said, "Alina brings joy to this house," while I was the one expected to bring stability. I didn't complain, at least not outwardly. I convinced myself that being useful, being dependable, was its own form of love, but deep inside I was growing tired. When I turned 25, I got a job in a tech company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough that I could finally stand on my own. I moved into a small apartment across the city, decorated it simply, and started saving. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something for myself. But my family didn't see it that way. To them, my independence was not pride, it was rebellion. They would call often, asking why I didn't visit every weekend, why I wasn't sending more money home. My mother's voice, though soft in tone, was always laced with guilt. "Nora, you know we've done so much for you. The least you can do is help your family," and I did help. I sent money when they needed it, bought gifts for holidays, and even helped pay for Alina's college fees when she changed her major twice. I thought that would prove I cared. I thought they would see that I was trying. But love, when measured in sacrifice, never stops demanding more. It all started to unravel one evening at dinner. I had driven down to visit my parents after weeks of avoiding their calls. I was tired from work, but I wanted to keep the peace. When I arrived, the table was already set. My mother was smiling, Alina was scrolling through her phone, and my father was quiet, which usually meant something was brewing. As we sat down, I noticed an unusual tension in the air. My father cleared his throat. "Nora, your sister has found someone. She's getting married." I blinked, then smiled faintly. "That's great news." "Congratulations, Alina." Alina grinned, not even looking up. "Thanks. It's going to be a big wedding. We've already started looking at venues." Something about the tone didn't sit right with me. My parents were watching me closely. My mother finally spoke. "Nora, we're proud of her. But you know how weddings are these days. They're expensive. We want to do it properly." I nodded slowly. "That makes sense. How can I help?" That's when my father looked directly into my eyes and said, "You'll pay for it." I thought I had misheard him. "What? You're earning well now. You don't have any major expenses. It's your duty as her elder sister to support her. We're not asking. You'll pay for the wedding." The air around me went still. I tried to laugh it off. "You can't be serious. You know weddings cost millions these days." My mother frowned. "Nora, don't talk like that. It's not about money. It's about family. You should be happy to do this for your sister." Alina finally looked up from her phone, smiling. "Don't worry, sis. I won't make it too big. Maybe just 3 events instead of 5. She said it like she was doing me a favor. I stared at her, then at my parents. "You're expecting me to pay for the entire wedding?" My father's tone hardened. "Yes, you're her sister. You've had your education, your job, your independence, all because we supported you. Now it's time to give back." Something cracked inside me that night. Years of silent obedience, of trying to earn their approval, began to crumble. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. I wanted to say no, but the way my mother's eyes narrowed told me that no was not an acceptable answer. "I can help," I said carefully. "But I can't pay for everything." "That's not fair." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Fair? After all we've done for you, you dare talk about fair? If you won't contribute to this family, then you can disappear from here forever." The words hung in the air, cold and final. My mother didn't stop him. Alina just sat there, that small smile never leaving her face. I stood up slowly, forcing myself to keep calm. I had always been the quiet one, the one who swallowed her anger, but not this time. "You want me to disappear?" I said softly. "Fine, but you should remember something." My father frowned. "What's that?" I looked at each of them. My mother's manipulative sadness, my father's anger, Alina's smug indifference. "You have 24 hours to leave this house." The table went silent. For a second, even I didn't know where the words had come from. My mother's mouth fell open. "What nonsense are you talking about?" I smiled calmly. "You heard me. 24 hours. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding but my steps steady. They didn't know it yet, but I wasn't bluffing. The house they lived in, the same one they had used to control me for years, was in my name. I had bought it 3 years ago when they were drowning in debt. I had paid off the mortgage, handled the legal papers, and told them they could live there peacefully. I had done it quietly, thinking it was love. But now, I finally saw it for what it was, a leash they had used to keep me under their control. As I drove home that night, the streets looked different. For years I had felt trapped between duty and resentment, but now, for the first time, I felt free. Not because I had power over them, but because I had stopped being afraid of losing them. That night, I sat on my couch in silence. The city lights flickered outside my window, and I thought about everything. My whole life had been about keeping others happy, but what had it given me? A family that saw my worth only in what I could provide. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. I didn't answer. Then came a message. "You've gone too far. You can't talk to your parents like this." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. Around noon, Alina called. Her tone was lighter. "Sis, come on. Don't be so dramatic. We didn't mean it like that. You know Dad says things he doesn't mean." I stayed silent. She continued. "Just say you'll pay a big part of it. It'll make things easier." I finally spoke. "Alina, you've always had everything handed to you. But this time you'll have to handle it yourself," she laughed. "You think you can cut us off? You can't." I hung up. That night my father showed up at my apartment. He didn't even knock. He just walked in, angry and red-faced. "You're disrespecting your parents, Nora. That's not how we raised you." I looked at him, calm as ever. "You raised me to believe love means obedience. I've learned that love doesn't demand silence." He pointed a finger at me. "You'll regret this." Maybe I would, I thought. But not today. When he left, I locked the door, sat down, and started making plans. I didn't want revenge in the way most people think of it. I didn't want shouting, or drama, or humiliation. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to see the difference between love and control. They had 24 hours to leave, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The city was still half asleep, and for a moment, everything felt unusually quiet. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the faint light spill over the rooftops. It was peaceful, but there was a strange weight pressing against my chest. I had drawn a line with my family, a line I had been afraid to even imagine before. I had told them they had 24 hours to leave the house. Even saying that still sounded unreal, even to me. It wasn't something I had planned in anger. It was more like a decision that had been slowly forming over years of small humiliations, disappointments, and guilt trips. It just finally came out that night at the dinner table. I had spent my entire life trying to earn love by giving, and all it had done was make them take more. I didn't know if they'd actually take my words seriously. My father's pride wouldn't let him imagine that his daughter could have such power over him. My mother would see it as a phase, something I'd regret and apologize for. And Alina, she probably thought this was just another one of my emotional overreactions. Still, I meant what I said. The house they were living in was legally mine. 3 years ago, when my parents had been on the verge of losing it, I had stepped in quietly and paid off the remaining debt. I did it out of love, but they never once said thank you. Instead, they told people that they had managed things with their savings. I let them. It didn't matter to me then, but now, That act of generosity had become my one piece of leverage. By noon, I received another call, this time from my uncle. "Nora, what's going on?" "Your parents are upset. They said you're throwing them out of their home?" I sighed. "Uncle, they're not being thrown out. I just said they need to respect me. They've crossed too many lines." He chuckled in disbelief. "They're your parents, Nora. You don't talk to elders like that." There it was again. The same sentence I'd heard my whole life, used like a weapon. Respect your elders, even when they disrespect you. Obey them even when they hurt you. "I've respected them my whole life," I said quietly. "But respect goes both ways. They don't get to demand and insult me just because they're older." He clicked his tongue. "You've changed, girl. Money has gone to your head." That stung, even though I expected it. I didn't argue. I just ended the call politely. There was no point explaining myself to people who measured worth in blind obedience. Around evening, I got a message from Alina. "You're being cruel. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Just send something to help, please." I read it a few times. The tone looked soft, maybe even sincere, but I knew my sister. She had learned to twist emotions into currency. I had fallen for that voice countless times before. I remembered all the times she had cried to get out of trouble, how she would say, "You're my best sister," right after making me pay her bills. So I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked the legal paperwork for the house again. My name, my signature, every document was clear. I wasn't doing anything illegal or spiteful. They had been living there rent-free for 3 years, while I handled repairs, taxes, and maintenance without a single complaint. But now that kindness had turned into expectation. Late that night, my mother called again. I didn't answer. Then a string of messages came one after another. "We raised you, Nora. Is this how you repay us? You'll regret this when we're gone. Your sister's wedding will be ruined because of your pride." I put my phone face down and closed my eyes. It wasn't easy. I wasn't made of stone. These were still my parents, no matter how cruel their words were. There was a part of me that wanted to drive there, apologize, and pretend everything was fine. But I knew if I did that, nothing would ever change. They'd learn that I'd always fold under guilt, and I didn't want to live that way anymore. The next day, around 5 p.m., I received a call from my father. His voice was calmer, but it carried that sharpness I knew too well. "We're not leaving," he said simply. "You can't make your own parents homeless." "I'm not making you homeless," I replied. "You have relatives, friends, and plenty of time to make arrangements. I'm just taking back what's mine." He snorted. "What's yours? Everything you have came from us. We fed you. We paid for your education. Now you think you're above us?" My hands trembled slightly, but my tone stayed steady. "You paid for my education with a government scholarship, and I've been supporting you ever since I started working. Don't twist this, Dad." He fell silent for a moment, then said coldly, "If you do this, you're no longer our daughter." That sentence hit like a knife. He had said something similar when I first told them I wanted to live alone, and back then, I had cried for hours. But not this time. I let the silence stretch, then said quietly, "If that's the price for peace, I'll pay it." Then I hung up. After the call, I sat alone for a long time. I replayed every memory that had brought us here. The birthdays where my achievements went unnoticed. The family dinners where my efforts were mocked. The endless lectures about how my worth was tied to how much I gave. It was strange, realizing that sometimes you have to lose your family to find yourself. The following morning, I called a lawyer. I asked him to prepare a formal notice transferring the house back into my full possession. He tried to confirm, asking if I was sure I wanted to go through with it. I said yes. Within 2 days, the notice was sent. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a simple letter, clear and legally sound. It gave them a week's grace period to vacate. Predictably, all hell broke loose. My mother showed up at my office, crying loudly in the lobby. My coworkers were stunned. She kept saying things like, "I don't know what we did wrong. We gave her everything, and now she's throwing us out." I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I stayed calm. I took her to a quiet corner and said softly, "Mom, please, don't do this here." "You're heartless," she said between sobs. "How can a daughter do this to her mother?" I took a deep breath. A mother doesn't ask her daughter to pay for someone else's wedding and threaten to disown her if she refuses. "You crossed that line, Mom, not me." Her eyes hardened immediately. The tears stopped as if they had never been there. She stood up, adjusted her shawl, and said coldly, "You'll regret this. Nora, one day you'll be alone and you'll wish you had us." She walked out, leaving a room full of silent coworkers staring at me. That night, I cried, not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I finally realized how deeply they had programmed me to feel guilt for choosing myself. I sat on my bed, hugging a pillow, and whispered to myself, "You did the right thing." Over the next few days, they tried different tactics. One day they'd call and beg. The next day they'd accuse me of betrayal. Then Alina would send pictures of wedding dresses with captions like, "Wish you could be happy for me." It was exhausting, but I held firm. When the week ended, my lawyer confirmed that they had vacated the house. Apparently, they had moved in with a relative temporarily. There was no grand confrontation, no shouting match, just silence. But silence, I learned, could be powerful. The next time I visited the house, it felt strangely empty. I walked through the rooms slowly. The furniture was still there, but everything looked smaller, duller. This was the place I had called home for so long, yet I felt no warmth from it anymore. It was like walking through the remains of an old life I had outgrown. I opened the curtains and let the sunlight pour in. The air felt lighter. For the first time, the house felt like mine. Not just legally, but emotionally. I decided to renovate it. Not out of spite, but to give it a new identity. A fresh coat of paint, new furniture, a small garden. Something peaceful. Something mine. As days passed, I started sleeping better. I began cooking again. Something I had stopped enjoying because of constant guilt and exhaustion. The quiet no longer felt lonely. It felt healing. Then, one afternoon, Alina showed up unannounced. She looked elegant, dressed in her usual expensive outfit, holding a coffee cup like she owned the world. "You really did it," she said with a half-smile. "You actually kicked them out." "I didn't kick them out," I said calmly. "I just stopped being their wallet." She rolled her eyes. "You've changed, Nora. You think money makes you better?" "No," I said. "It just means I can finally choose peace." For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her expression. Maybe guilt, maybe realization. But it was gone quickly. "Anyway," she said lightly, "I hope you don't expect an invite to the wedding." I smiled faintly. "I don't." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You know they'll never forgive you." I met her eyes. "That's fine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted freedom." She left, and I closed the door gently behind her. For the first time in my life, I felt what real calm revenge looked like. It wasn't shouting or destroying anyone. It was building a life that no longer depended on their approval. And I wasn't done yet. There were still things I needed to do. Quiet, deliberate steps that would make sure they finally understood what it meant to lose someone who had always been there for them. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about balance. And the next step was going to be the one they never saw coming. When Alina left that day, I stood by the door for a long while after it closed. The sound of her heels faded down the corridor, and then there was nothing, just quiet. The kind of quiet that used to make me anxious, but now felt strangely grounding. For years, I had been told that family came first, that no matter what happened, I was supposed to forgive, to adjust, to give, to understand. But I was starting to see how easily family could become an excuse for manipulation. I didn't hate them, not even after everything. What I felt was more complicated, a mixture of sadness, exhaustion, and maybe deep down, a faint hope that one day they might understand what they had done. I tried to focus on my work. My manager noticed a difference in me, Maybe because I wasn't walking around tense and distracted all the time anymore. I started handling new projects, mentoring juniors, and for the first time, I even took a weekend trip alone. It was strange how peaceful solitude could be when it wasn't forced upon you. But peace doesn't come without echoes. One Friday night, while I was cleaning the kitchen, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before picking up. "Hello?" There was silence for a few seconds. Then my father's voice, rough and tired. "Nora, we need to talk." I stayed silent, waiting. He sighed. "Your mother isn't doing well. She's been crying every day. She says she can't eat, can't sleep. Your sister's wedding is coming up, and everyone's asking questions. You've embarrassed us." Embarrassed. That word again. I'd been hearing it since I was a child. Every choice I made that didn't align with their image of me was embarrassing. I almost laughed, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm sorry to hear that, Dad, but I didn't embarrass anyone. I just set a boundary," he scoffed. "You're being stubborn. All families fight, but they don't destroy each other." I took a slow breath. I'm not destroying anyone. I just stopped being used. He didn't like that. His tone hardened. "You think this will make you happy? Living alone, acting righteous? You'll regret it when you're older. Family is everything." "Family," I repeated softly. "Yes, it should be. But not when it costs your peace, your dignity, and your self-worth." He didn't respond. I heard him exhale sharply, then the line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was clarity. The kind that comes when you realize some people only love the version of you that benefits them. Over the next few days, I heard bits and pieces through mutual relatives. Apparently, my parents had been telling everyone that I had changed after getting rich. They painted themselves as victims, as helpless parents whose ungrateful daughter had thrown them out. People whispered, judged, and some even sent me messages asking if it was true. At first, it hurt. Then I stopped caring, because the truth doesn't need defense, it just needs patience. Weeks went by. I poured myself into my work, and my home slowly became a sanctuary. The new paint smell faded, replaced by the gentle aroma of fresh coffee and peace. I started reading again, journaling at night, and rediscovering small joys I had long ignored. Then, one afternoon, a courier dropped off a letter. It was from my sister. Her handwriting hadn't changed, round, soft, almost innocent looking. "Nora, I know you hate me now. I don't blame you. I just wish things hadn't gone this way. Mom and Dad are struggling, but they'll never say it. The wedding is still happening, but it's been hard without your help. I know you don't owe us anything, but you're still my sister. Can you please come, even just for one day?" It wasn't dramatic, just quietly manipulative in that familiar way. I folded the letter neatly and set it aside. For a few minutes, I thought about it. Part of me wanted to go, just to see her, to see if maybe there was a sliver of sincerity in her words. But the other part of me, the wiser one, knew that this was another attempt to pull me back into their cycle. Still, something about the phrasing bothered me. "It's been hard without your help." That sounded less like emotion and more like a financial complaint. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I went online and searched for her wedding planner's social media page. I found it easily, the same planner my mother had once mentioned wanting to hire. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through the photos. There it was, Alina's wedding teaser. A huge outdoor venue, floral arches, live band, designer decor, the kind of lavish event that would have cost a fortune. So much for "it's been hard." I stared at the screen for a while, then closed it. I wasn't angry. I just felt distant, like I was finally watching them from outside their bubble. A few weeks later, I got another call, this time from my cousin Sana, the only person in the family who had stayed neutral through all of this. "I don't want to take sides," she said gently, "but you should know that they're telling everyone you kicked them out because you wanted to sell the house." I let out a quiet laugh. "Of course they are." "I just thought you should know," she said. "But honestly, Nora, people are starting to see through it. The story keeps changing. Some of us understand what really happened. That made me smile faintly. Thanks, Sana. I'm fine. Really. After that call, I realized something important. People who manipulate always underestimate time. Because time, slowly but surely, reveals who's telling the truth. Then, one night, Alina called again. Her voice was softer than usual, almost fragile. I'm getting married next week. I don't know, I wanted to hear your voice. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. I hope everything goes well, I said simply. She exhaled shakily. I wish you were coming. Mom's pretending she's fine, but she keeps crying. Dad doesn't talk much. Everyone keeps asking where you are. I know, I said quietly, but I can't be part of something built on lies and guilt. There was a long pause. You've really changed, she whispered. I had to, I said. She didn't argue. Instead, she said, I'll send you pictures after the wedding. Maybe someday we'll laugh about this. Maybe, I said softly. When the wedding day came, I didn't check social media. I went for a walk by the sea instead. The air was cool, the waves gentle, and the horizon stretched endlessly before me. I realized how small that old version of my life had been, how narrow, how suffocating. This vast openness was what I'd been missing all along. The following week, I received another envelope. Inside was a photograph, Alina in her wedding dress, smiling radiantly, her new husband beside her. On the back, she had written, "You were missed." I placed it inside a drawer, not out of resentment, but out of acceptance. Sometimes closure doesn't come with apologies. It comes with peace. Months passed. My parents didn't reach out, and I didn't either. But life has a way of looping back. One rainy evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Nora, I'm calling from City Medical Center. Your mother has been admitted." For a moment, the world around me froze. I drove there immediately, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I reached the hospital, I saw my father sitting in the waiting area. His shoulders looked smaller somehow, his expression hollow. He looked up when he saw me but didn't say a word. I approached him slowly. "What happened?" "High blood pressure," he muttered. "She fainted." I nodded quietly and went inside the room. My mother was lying on the bed, her face pale, her eyes closed. For all our fights and bitterness, seeing her like that broke something inside me. I sat beside her, watching her breathe. After a while, her eyes opened slightly. When she saw me, tears filled them instantly. "You came," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "You're still my mother." She reached for my hand. "I was wrong," she said weakly. "I shouldn't have said those things." I squeezed her hand gently. "Rest now. We can talk later." She nodded, her eyes closing again. I sat there in silence, feeling a storm of emotions. Pain, relief, maybe even forgiveness. Later that night, my father came into the room. He stood at the foot of the bed, looking uncertain. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I didn't come for thanks," I said. "I came because family still matters to me, even if I had to step away to protect myself." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. Maybe we both needed to learn something. I didn't respond. But inside, I knew he was right. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about ending a cycle. After my mother was discharged, I helped arrange some things for them. Not money, just practical help, like setting up their prescriptions, getting a caretaker, and arranging a smaller apartment closer to my place. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was balance. One evening, as I dropped off some paperwork, my father said quietly, "We may not deserve it, but thank you." I looked at him and said gently, "You raised me to be responsible." Maybe I just learned to be responsible in my own way. When I walked out, the evening air felt different, lighter, softer. I realized revenge doesn't always mean watching someone suffer. Sometimes it means living well, setting boundaries, and letting people face themselves. And though I didn't know what the future held for us, I finally felt at peace with the past. But peace, I would soon learn, can still be tested. Because sometimes people don't change, they adapt. And I was about to find out how far they would go to test my calm once again. I didn't sleep much that night after the confrontation. Even though I had spoken with calm confidence, the silence that followed felt heavy. The house that once echoed with laughter and noise now felt like a shell. Too quiet, too cold. Every clock tick reminded me that the 24 hours were running out. I had made my stand, and now I had to live with it. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, the smell of burnt toast hit me first. My mother stood by the stove, still in her nightgown, stirring tea. She didn't look at me. My father sat at the dining table, newspaper open, pretending to read. The atmosphere was painfully still. I sat down across from them and spoke softly. "I'll be moving out today." My father lowered his newspaper and stared at me for a few seconds before replying. "So you're serious about this?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I meant what I said. My mother finally turned around, eyes red, voice trembling. "You're abandoning your family over money?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing peace over manipulation." The words hung in the air like smoke. My father shook his head, muttering something under his breath, and left the room. My mother didn't follow him. She just stood there, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. When I walked into my room to pack, I paused for a moment. The walls were filled with old photographs, family vacations, birthdays, and school events. For a second, I wondered if I was making a mistake. But then I remembered that love without respect is a cage. I had lived too long trying to be the good daughter, and all it brought me was guilt and exhaustion. I folded my clothes neatly into a small suitcase and took a deep breath. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from relief. For the first time, I was choosing myself. By afternoon, I had moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, thin walls, and a noisy street outside. But it was mine. I made a cup of coffee, sat on the floor beside the window, and just stared outside. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just felt a strange quietness inside me, the kind that comes after a long storm. A few days passed before my sister Hania called me. Her voice was unusually cheerful. "So you've really left home?" she asked, almost teasing. "Yes," I said. "I'm doing fine." "Mom's been crying nonstop," she replied, her tone mixed with guilt and irritation. "You should just come back and apologize. You know how emotional she gets." I sighed. "Hania, this isn't about emotions. It's about boundaries." "Boundaries?" She laughed lightly. "You sound like one of those therapists." "I guess I've been forced to become my own," I said quietly. She didn't reply for a moment, then said, "Anyway, the wedding's still happening. I just thought you'd want to know." "Of course it is," I said calmly. "I wish you well." There was an awkward pause before she hung up. That was the last time we spoke for weeks. I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I poured my energy into work, joined a local art class, and started taking morning walks in the park. Slowly, I began to rediscover who I was without the weight of family expectations. I learned to enjoy solitude. But one evening, about 2 months later, I got an unexpected message from my cousin Zara. It said, "You should see what your family is saying about you on Facebook." My heart sank a little, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened my phone and scrolled. There it was. A long post from my mother, written with the kind of sorrow that invites sympathy. She wrote about how one of her children abandoned her in her time of need, and how selfish modern values were destroying family unity. The comments were full of distant relatives offering support, pitying her, and criticizing me without knowing the story. At first, I felt anger rising in my chest. But then I stopped. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this is what happens when you refuse to play the role others assign to you. They rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. So instead of responding online, I called Zara. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. She hesitated before asking, "Aren't you going to say something?" "No," I said. "My peace doesn't depend on their version of the story. It depends on mine." That night, I opened my journal and began writing everything that had happened. Every word, every emotion, every memory. It was like pulling thorns out of my skin one by one. I didn't realize how heavy it all was until I saw it on paper. Weeks turned into months. I didn't attend the wedding. I heard from mutual relatives that my absence caused quite a stir. Some sided with me quietly, others called me ungrateful. But none of it mattered anymore. I had already made peace with the idea that family isn't defined by shared blood, but by shared respect. One night, around 3 months after moving out, I got a call from my father. His voice was quieter than usual, almost unsure. "Nora," he said, "we haven't heard from you in a while." "I know," I replied calmly. He sighed. "Your mother, she misses you." "I miss her too," I said, "but I can't come back to the same dynamics." He was silent for a long moment before asking, "Do you really think we were that bad?" "I think you didn't listen," I said softly. "You treated my independence as disobedience." He didn't argue. Instead, he said, "Maybe I did. Maybe we both did." That was the first honest moment between us in years. After that call, small things began to change. My mother started sending messages. Nothing emotional at first, just small check-ins like, "Are you eating well?" Or, "It's cold, wear something warm." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Then one afternoon, she sent me a message that made me pause. It said, "We realized we asked too much from you. You were always the responsible one. I'm sorry we made you feel like an obligation instead of a daughter." I read it twice before replying. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Months later, I finally met them again. It wasn't dramatic. No tears or shouting. We met at a quiet restaurant. My mother looked older, my father quieter. My sister, glowing in her married life, sat beside them. "Congratulations," I said to Hania with a gentle smile. "You look happy." She smiled back almost shyly. "Thank you, Nora. You look peaceful." That word, peaceful, stayed with me, because for the first time in my life it was true. During dinner, there were pauses filled with unspoken words. But there was also something new. Respect. My parents didn't question my choices. They didn't bring up money. They didn't lecture. They just talked about simple things, about how the garden had grown, how my father had started cooking, and how they were learning to live with fewer expectations. When we said goodbye, my mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "You were right to walk away." On the way home, I felt tears streaming down my cheeks, not from pain, but from release. I finally understood that sometimes revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about healing yourself so completely that their power over you disappears. In the months that followed, I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping those who struggled with the same kind of emotional control I had endured. I told them, "Your calm is your strength. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to decide that your peace matters more than approval." And that became my quiet revenge. To live well, to live free, and to live with dignity. The family I once thought I lost, I eventually found again, not through submission, but through honesty. They respected me now because I respected myself first. And if you're listening to this story and it feels familiar, if you've ever been told to sacrifice your happiness just to keep others comfortable, remember this. Your worth isn't measured by what you give to those who drain you. It's measured by the peace you build within yourself. Because sometimes the calmest revenge is not shouting back. It's walking away and letting silence say what words never could. If you liked this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge. After that dinner with my parents, something inside me shifted quietly. It wasn't a loud, cinematic change. No grand music, no dramatic ending. Just a deep exhale that had been trapped in my chest for years. For the first time, I went home not feeling like I had escaped something, but like I had finally arrived where I belonged, in my own peace. Life after reconciliation wasn't perfect. It never is. There were moments when I still felt small, when my old instincts returned, the urge to explain myself, to make everyone happy, to prove that I was still the good daughter. But every time those feelings rose, I paused, took a deep breath, and reminded myself of one thing. Peace isn't given, it's practiced. A few weeks later, my mother called me and asked in a hesitant tone if I could visit home for lunch. She said she wanted to show me something. The hesitation in her voice wasn't guilt this time. It was care. I could sense the difference. When I arrived, I noticed how different the house felt. The walls had been repainted and the furniture rearranged. Even the energy felt lighter. My father greeted me with a smile that wasn't forced. Hania and her husband were visiting too, and to my surprise, they both seemed genuinely happy to see me. During lunch, we spoke about ordinary things, work, weather, small family updates. My father cracked a joke, and my mother laughed like she hadn't in years. I just watched them for a while, feeling the surreal calm of it all. It was as if the tension that had once filled this home had dissolved into something new. Fragile, but real. After lunch, my mother asked me to come into her room. On her dressing table, there was a small wooden box, the same one she used to keep her jewelry in when I was a child. She opened it and handed me a folded piece of paper. "I want you to read this," she said softly. It was a letter. She had written it after I moved out, a letter she never sent. In it, she poured her confusion, her anger, her guilt, and finally, her realization. She wrote about how she had always measured love by obedience, how she believed sacrifice was proof of devotion, and how it took my silence to make her see the truth. She ended it with one line that made me cry quietly. "You taught me that love without freedom is fear, and I'm sorry I made you live in fear for so long." I hugged her tightly, and she whispered, "I'm learning, Nora. It's slow, but I'm learning." That moment didn't erase the past, but it gave it meaning. It was proof that healing is possible, even for families that once tore each other apart. Over the next few months, our relationship rebuilt itself in small, steady steps. My parents didn't expect me to fix their problems anymore. They started asking about my life, what I wanted, what made me happy. My father even visited my apartment one weekend, bringing along his favorite old record player. He said he wanted to hear how music sounds in your new world. We sat on my couch, listening to soft jazz, sipping tea, and for the first time, I saw him not as the man who shouted at me years ago, but as a father trying to understand. Meanwhile, my sister Hania began to open up too. One evening, she called me unexpectedly, her voice trembling. "Nora," she said, "I think I understand now." "What do you mean?" I asked gently. "Marriage isn't what I thought it would be," she whispered. "I thought it was all happiness and love, but it's complicated. There are expectations, pressures, and sometimes I feel like I can't breathe." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. It was the first time she had ever sounded vulnerable with me. She continued, "When you stood up that night and said those words, 'You have 24 hours to leave,' I thought you were cruel. But now I see that you were brave. You did what I couldn't." My eyes welled up as I said softly, "You don't have to repeat the same mistakes, Hania. You can choose peace too." She took a deep breath. "Maybe one day I will. But for now, I just wanted to tell you, I understand." That call changed our bond forever. We began talking more often, not out of obligation but out of sisterhood. She no longer saw me as the rebel, but as someone who had walked through the fire first and survived. By the end of that year, I had written about the entire experience in my journal, from the dinner where it all began to the quiet reconciliation that followed. Writing became a kind of therapy for me, and one day as I reread those pages, I realized something profound. This wasn't just my story. It was the story of so many people who had been told that love means sacrifice, that duty means losing yourself, that family means never saying no. So, I decided to share it. Not the private details, but the essence. I started a small online blog called My Calm Revenge, where I wrote about stories like mine. Not about revenge through anger, but through peace, strength, and clarity. I didn't expect much, but within weeks, messages started pouring in from people around the world. Some wrote, "Your story helped me understand my mother." Others said, "I finally left a toxic home and found peace because of your words." I read every message with tears in my eyes. I had spent years thinking I was alone in this kind of pain. But suddenly, I saw thousands of people carrying the same invisible burden. And in sharing it, I realized, revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about freeing yourself so completely that their opinions no longer control you. Months later, my father called me again. "Your mother and I read your blog," he said quietly. "It's powerful." "Thank you," I said, half nervous. He paused before adding, "At first it hurt to read, but now I think it's helping us understand what we never did back then." That call meant more than any apology could. As the years passed, my life took a new rhythm. I was no longer the people-pleaser daughter, nor the angry rebel. I was simply me. I built friendships that felt real, started traveling, and even began hosting small workshops on emotional boundaries and calm communication. It wasn't about teaching people how to fight back. It was about teaching them how to protect their peace without guilt. Sometimes, I'd still visit my parents. The house felt different now. My mother often cooked my favorite dishes, and my father always saved the biggest chair at the table for me, not because they felt obligated, but because they wanted to. One evening, while sitting with them in the garden, my father looked at me and said, "You know, Nora, when you left that day, I thought we had lost you forever." I smiled gently. "You did lose the version of me that was afraid, but you found the one who finally learned to breathe." He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. That night, I walked outside and looked up at the stars, the same sky I had looked at so many nights before, but it felt different now. It felt like closure. Sometimes, revenge doesn't come wrapped in justice or dramatic endings. Sometimes it's the quiet morning when you wake up and realize you're no longer angry. You're not trying to prove anything. You've simply healed, and that is what happened to me. My revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was calm, steady, and freeing. I didn't destroy anyone's world. I just rebuilt mine. So when I look back at that night at the dinner table, the yelling, the accusations, the tears, I no longer feel pain. I feel gratitude, because that was the night I stopped living in fear. That was the night I discovered that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I know many people won't understand that kind of revenge. They think it has to be dramatic, fiery, filled with regret or punishment. But real revenge, the kind that changes lives, is quiet. It's walking away from chaos with your head held high and never letting that chaos own your peace again. And if you're listening to my story today, maybe you're standing at your own dinner table moment, where someone is yelling, demanding, or manipulating you into silence. If you are, I want you to know this. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't have to prove your loyalty by suffering. You don't have to choose pain to be worthy of love. Walk away if you must. Heal if you can, but never forget, your calm is your strength. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living the life they said you couldn't. If you felt something while listening to my story, please like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge. Every story here is a reminder that peace is power, and sometimes the calmest voices carry the deepest truths. Thank you for listening, and remember, your story of quiet strength could be the next calm revenge the world needs to hear.